I'm James, 34 male. I live in a small but bustling city in an apartment above what used to be my life's work, a specialty coffee roastery I built from the ground up. For 5 years, every morning started with the rich smell of roasting beans and the hum of machinery I knew like the back of my hand. I poured my heart, soul, and savings into that business, believing I was building a future alongside a man I considered my brother. This is the story of how that man, my business partner, orchestrated a masterful deception to steal that future from me, and how a single, arrogant photo from a tropical paradise gave me the key to taking it all back. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. 5 years ago, Artisan Roast Collective was just a dream sketched out on a napkin in a noisy pub. I was the coffee guy, the obsessive craftsman who could tell the origin of a bean by its scent alone. I had spent a decade working my way up from a teenage barista to a head roaster for a major brand. I understood the mechanics, the chemistry, and the art of turning a raw green bean into a perfect cup of coffee. What I didn't understand was business. Marketing, branding, customer acquisition, it was all a foreign language to me. That's where Julian came in. Julian was charisma personified. He was 3 years older, impeccably dressed, and had a smile that could disarm a firing squad. We met at a local business incubator event. While I was nervously trying to explain the nuances of single-origin sourcing, Julian was holding court, captivating a small crowd with tales of his past marketing successes. He claimed to have launched 2 successful tech startups, selling them for a tidy profit before moving on to find a new passion project. He approached me after my presentation, his eyes gleaming with an intensity that felt like a spotlight. "James, my friend," he said, clapping a hand on my shoulder, "you're the talent, the artist. I'm the guy who sells the tickets to the show. Together, we could build an empire." It was intoxicating. He saw the potential in my craft that I was too modest to acknowledge. We spent the next month in a whirlwind of planning. He was a master of spreadsheets and projections, painting a picture of growth so vivid I could almost taste it. He made the business side feel exciting, not intimidating. I would handle all operations, sourcing the beans, perfecting the roast profiles, managing the equipment, and training our staff. He would be the face of the company, handling marketing, sales, strategic partnerships, and all the financial management. It seemed like a perfect division of labor, a partnership built on complementary strengths. We secured a modest startup loan and I cashed out my entire life savings. My parents, cautious but supportive, even chipped in what they could. Julian claimed to match my investment, showing me a bank statement that in retrospect was probably expertly forged. We found a perfect location in a revitalizing downtown district, a former warehouse with high ceilings and brick walls. It was a shell, but I could see the vision. For 6 months, we worked tirelessly. I was there from dawn until midnight, covered in dust and paint, personally overseeing the installation of our prized possession, a state-of-the-art Gießen coffee roaster imported from the Netherlands. Julian was rarely on site, but he was a blur of activity elsewhere, meeting with potential clients, designing our branding, and schmoozing with local influencers. When we opened, the success was immediate and overwhelming. Julian's marketing had worked. We were the talk of the town. Our little cafe at the front of the roastery was constantly packed, and our wholesale orders to other cafes and restaurants started pouring in. I was in my element, orchestrating the complex dance of roasting, cupping, and quality control. Julian handled the money. He set up the accounts, managed the payroll, and paid the suppliers. He would give me weekly updates, showing me spreadsheets with impressive, ever-climbing numbers. "See, partner," he'd say with a dazzling smile, "told you we were a winning team." I trusted him implicitly. He wasn't just a business partner, he was my best friend. We celebrated victories together and supported each other through the inevitable startup struggles. When my father had a health scare, Julian insisted I take a week off, promising he'd handle everything. When his own long-term relationship ended, I was the one he called at 2 a.m. and we talked until the sun came up. He became a fixture at my family dinners, charming my parents and making my cousin Ava laugh with his stories. He was family. Our landlord David, a stoic man in his mid-40s who owned half the block, was impressed with our progress. "You boys are doing good." "Work," he grunted one afternoon, observing the bustling cafe. "Not like the last tenants, you pay your rent on time, I appreciate that." Coming from David, that was high praise. Even our head barista Isabel, a young, passionate coffee enthusiast, idolized both of us. She saw me as the quiet master and Julian as the visionary leader. We were a team, a family, building something real and lasting. The trust was absolute, the bond seemingly unbreakable. I was so focused on the craft, on the tangible reality of the beans and the heat, that I never thought to look closely at the numbers myself. He was my partner, my brother. He handled the money and I handled the coffee. It was the perfect arrangement, and that absolute trust was the foundation upon which he would build his million-dollar lie. It was a foundation I had laid myself, brick by trusting brick, never once suspecting it would all be used to build my own prison. The business was my life and he was the architect of its public face. I was the engine, he was the driver. We were heading for the stars, or so I thought. The truth was he was driving us straight toward a cliff with his hand on the eject button and my name on the lease. The sense of brotherhood and shared purpose he cultivated so expertly was the most critical tool in his arsenal. It wasn't just a business he was planning to gut. It was a friendship, a family, and my entire future. And I, the trusting artist, was too busy admiring the view to notice his foot hovering over the gas. The partnership was perfect, but only for him. It was the long con of a lifetime, and I was the perfect mark. The crisis arrived, as all well-manufactured crises do, with a sudden and terrifying bang. It was a Tuesday morning in early November, our busiest season, as we geared up for the holiday rush. I was in the middle of a delicate roasting cycle for a rare geisha varietal, my senses tuned to the subtle cues of the beans, the scent, the color, the crackling sound that signaled the first stage of development. Suddenly, the deep, rhythmic hum of the Gießen roaster faltered. It coughed, sputtered, and then died with a sickening metallic screech that echoed through the entire warehouse. A plume of acrid smoke billowed from the main drum housing. I hit the emergency stop and rushed to the machine. Panic, cold and sharp, seized my chest. This roaster wasn't just a piece of equipment, it was the heart of our entire operation. Every dollar we made, every client we served depended on it. I spent the next hour frantically troubleshooting, my hands covered in grease and my mind racing. The control panel was dead and the main drive motor was completely seized. It was a catastrophic failure, the kind of thing that was supposed to happen to a 20-year-old machine, not a top-of-the-line model that was barely 5 years old. I called Julian immediately. He answered on the first ring, his voice a mask of calm concern. "What's wrong, buddy? You sound panicked." I explained the situation, my voice trembling with a mixture of fear and frustration. "The Gießen is dead, Julian. I mean completely dead. It's not a simple fix. The main motor and the entire electronic board are fried. This is a disaster." He arrived at the roastery within 30 minutes, looking every bit the concerned business partner. He surveyed the scene, shaking his head slowly, his expression a perfect blend of sympathy and gravitas. "Okay, James, don't panic. We'll figure this out," he said, putting a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "What's the damage?" I had already been on the phone with the manufacturer in the Netherlands. The diagnosis was grim. Due to the nature of the failure, a simple repair wasn't possible. We needed a full motor replacement and a new integrated control system. The parts alone would be tens of thousands of dollars, and the specialized labor and air freight would push the total cost into the stratosphere. Worse, there was a lead time. We would be down for at least 3 weeks, maybe 4. 3 weeks during our peak season was a death sentence. Our wholesale clients depended on us. Our cafe would run out of our own coffee within days. Our reputation for consistency and reliability would be shattered. Julian let me spiral for a few minutes before he presented his solution. "We can't wait," he said, his voice firm and decisive. "We have to be bold. I've been looking at the new model, the W15A. It has double the capacity and is 30% more energy efficient. Our projections show we'd outgrow our current machine in 2 years anyway. This is a crisis, yes, but it's also an opportunity. We can leapfrog our growth plan." It sounded insane. A new machine like that cost a fortune, well over $100,000. "Julian, we don't have that kind of capital just sitting around," I argued. "We're profitable, but our cash flow is tied up in inventory and operating costs." He nodded as if expecting this. "I know, I've already been on T." He phoned with our bank manager, he lied smoothly. "They're sympathetic. Given our strong performance, they're willing to fast-track an emergency business loan, a big one, enough to cover the new machine, the expedited shipping, the installation, and even a little extra to cover our losses and payroll while we're down." He named a number that made my stomach clench, $250,000. $250,000, he repeated, seeing my expression. "It's a lot, I know. But it secures our future, James. It turns this catastrophe into a power move." He was so convincing. He laid out a plan with such confidence and detail that my panic began to subside, replaced by a reluctant sense of hope. He said the bank needed both of our signatures on the loan documents as we were equal partners. He framed it as a shared burden, a testament to our partnership. "We're in this together, buddy, sink or swim," he said, looking me directly in the eye. The pressure was immense. Every passing hour meant more lost revenue, more angry clients. My focus was singular: get the roaster running. I was the operations guy and my operation was dead in the water. I wasn't thinking about the fine print, I was thinking about the beans. The next day, Julian brought the loan documents to the roastery. We sat at a table in the silent, darkened cafe, the smell of burnt electronics still hanging in the air. He walked me through the paperwork, pointing to the key figures, the interest rate, the repayment terms. It all seemed standard. My mind was a fog of stress. I saw the loan as the only lifeline available. I trusted Julian. He was the finance guy. He wouldn't steer us wrong, so I signed. I signed my name next to his on every page, binding my personal finances to the fate of our business and placing my entire future in his hands. He told me the money would be deposited into our primary business account within 48 hours. He would then handle the wire transfer to the manufacturer in the Netherlands to place the order. He took the signed documents and left, promising to take care of everything. For the next 2 days, there was a strange sense of calm. The crisis was being handled. I focused on what I could control, calling our clients, explaining the situation with the carefully crafted script Julian had written for me, and trying to source roasted coffee from a competitor to keep our cafe afloat. On Friday afternoon, I called Julian for an update. "Did the money come through? Did you place the order?" I asked. "All done," he said, his voice cheerful. "Wire transfer is sent. They're processing the order now. Just got the confirmation email. I'm heading out for the weekend to decompress a bit. This week has been brutal. You should do the same, James. The hard part is over." I felt a profound sense of relief. We had weathered the storm. We were going to be okay. That weekend, I tried to relax, but the silence of the roastery was unnerving. On Monday morning, I arrived early, expecting to find an email from the manufacturer with a shipping timeline. There was nothing. I tried calling Julian. His phone went straight to voicemail. That was odd. He never turned his phone off. I sent him a text. No reply. A knot of unease began to form in my stomach. I decided to check the business bank account online just to see the transaction for myself. I logged in, my heart starting to pound a little faster. The page loaded, I looked at the balance, and I felt the world drop out from under me. The account was nearly empty. The $250,000 loan had been deposited on Thursday, and on Friday morning, just hours later, a single wire transfer had been made, not to a machinery company in the Netherlands. The entire amount, $250,000, had been wired to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. The screen glowed in the dark office, the numbers mocking me. $250,000 transferred. Balance, $1,743.19. It didn't make sense. My first thought wasn't betrayal, but a mistake, a hack, a catastrophic banking error. The idea that Julian, my partner, my friend, would do this was so unthinkable that my brain refused to process it. I called him again. Voicemail, and again, voicemail. I called the bank, my voice frantic. The customer service representative was polite but unhelpful. The transfer was authorized, initiated from our account with the correct credentials. There were no flags, no signs of a breach. It was a legitimate transaction. Panic gave way to a creeping, sickening dread. I spent the rest of the day in a frantic haze trying to reach Julian. I called his cell, his home phone, even his parents who hadn't heard from him in days. I drove to his apartment. The concierge told me he'd seen Julian leave on Friday with 2 large suitcases, saying he was going on a much-needed vacation. The pieces were starting to click into place, forming a picture I didn't want to see: the broken roaster. The perfectly timed opportunity, the rushed loan, the disappearance. It wasn't a series of unfortunate events, it was a script, and I had played my part to perfection. The weight of the situation crashed down on me. I was personally on the hook for a $250,000 loan. The business was dead in the water with no way to generate income. My life savings were gone. My parents' investment was gone. Everything I had worked for, everything I had built had vanished in a single, authorized wire transfer. The betrayal was so immense, so absolute, it felt like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. I stumbled back to the empty roastery and just sat there in the dark, surrounded by the ghosts of my ambition, the silence broken only by the hum of the beverage cooler. For 3 days I was paralyzed. I was a zombie, alternating between fits of rage and depths of despair. I ignored the calls from suppliers asking for payment and the emails from wholesale clients demanding updates. The world had become a muffled, distant roar. The partnership, the friendship, the shared dream, it had all been a lie, a long, elaborate con. He had likely sabotaged the roaster himself, creating the very crisis he so expertly solved. He had used my trust, my passion, my friendship, as leverage to ruin me. My cousin Ava, a financial auditor with a mind as sharp as a razor, was the one who pulled me out of it. She found me sitting in the dark, unshaven and hollow-eyed. She didn't offer platitudes or sympathy. She put a cup of coffee in my hand, brewed from a bag I'd roasted weeks ago, and said, "Okay, James, he beat you. Now are you going to stay down, or are you going to get up and figure out how to hit back?" Her pragmatism was the splash of cold water I needed. She sat with me for hours, going over everything. She looked at the loan documents, the bank statements, and the business's financials. He was smart, she admitted, her brow furrowed. From a legal standpoint, this is difficult. You co-signed the loan, the transfer was made from your business account. You'd have to prove criminal intent that he defrauded you from the start. That's a high bar. Despair began to creep back in, but Ava held it at bay. We need evidence, she said, her tone shifting from analytical to strategic. We need something that proves he lied, something that shows his intent. Right now, it's your word against his story, and he's not here to tell it. He could claim the transfer was a mistake, or that you approved it, or a million other things. That night, unable to sleep, I found myself doing what any scorned person in the 21st century does. I started scrolling through social media. It was a pointless, masochistic act. I looked at our company's Instagram page, full of happy pictures of me and Julian smiling, building our dream. It felt like watching a movie about someone else's life. On a whim, I typed Julian's name into the search bar. His personal profile was private, as expected. But then I started searching for his friends, his ex-girlfriend, anyone connected to him. I went down a rabbit hole of tagged photos and mutual connections. Hours passed. My eyes were burning from the screen's glare, and then I found it. It was on the public profile of a woman I vaguely recognized from one of Julian's parties. She was a travel influencer, the kind of person who seemed to live a permanently curated, sun-drenched life. And there, in her latest post, was Julian. He was standing on the deck of a catamaran, a turquoise ocean stretching out behind him. He had a triumphant, carefree smile on his face, a cocktail in his hand, and his arm around the influencer. He looked like a man without a single worry in the world. My blood ran cold. But it was the caption and the timestamp that made my heart stop. The caption read, "Island hopping with this one, no better way to escape the November cold. Sun tropical drink paradise making memories Caribbean life." The photo was geotagged the Bahamas. And the timestamp posted 5 days ago. 5 days ago, that was the Tuesday he was in our roastery, his face a mask of concern, telling me our business was collapsing. That was the day our roaster catastrophically failed. That was the day he sold me on the $1 million lie. He wasn't in our city sharing my panic, he was already in paradise. The photo was the proof. It was the crack in his perfect story. He had lied about his location, lied about the crisis, and the timestamp on that picture was the digital ghost that would come back to haunt him. He had been so arrogant, so sure he had gotten away with it, that he couldn't resist showing off. He had to perform his success even while he was in the middle of his crime. That picture wasn't just a picture, it was evidence, it was motive, it was everything. A wave of pure cold fury washed over me, cleansing the despair. He thought he was untouchable. He thought he was free, he had no idea I was looking. And in that moment I knew this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of the hunt. The photograph was my ancho. Art grounded my rage and gave it a direction. For the first time in a week, I felt a sense of purpose beyond simple survival. The despair was replaced by a cold, calculating resolve. Julian had made a mistake. A tiny, arrogant social media mistake, and I was going to leverage it to tear his entire scheme apart. The next morning, I showed the photo to Ava. She stared at it for a long moment, her auditor's brain instantly processing the implications. "Timestamped and geotagged," she murmured, a slow smile spreading across her face. "This is it, James. This is the linchpin. This proves he wasn't here when he said he was. This establishes a timeline of deceit." With Ava guiding me, we began to work systematically. This wasn't about emotional vengeance anymore, it was about building an airtight case. Our first step was to establish with certainty that Julian was responsible for the roaster's failure. He needed a crisis big enough and technical enough that you wouldn't question it, Ava theorized. He knew you'd be too focused on the operational problem to scrutinize the financial solution. I spent 2 full days meticulously disassembling the damaged components of the Giessen roaster. I am not an electrical engineer, but I know that machine intimately. What I found was subtle but damning. The main power conduit leading to the motor had been intentionally frayed and exposed, right next to a coolant line that had been loosened just enough to create a slow, almost imperceptible drip. It was a time bomb. The combination of moisture and exposed high-voltage wiring was guaranteed to cause a catastrophic short circuit. It wasn't a failure, it was sabotage. An amateur would have just cut a wire, but this was clever. It was designed to look like a complex internal malfunction. I took dozens of high-resolution photos documenting everything. Next, Ava and I turned our attention to the money. The wire transfer was our biggest legal hurdle. We needed to prove that the destination account was Julian's. Ava explained that getting information on an offshore account in the Cayman Islands was nearly impossible without a court order, which we couldn't get without a criminal investigation. "We have to work backwards," she said, scribbling on a whiteboard we'd set up in the office. He had to have a plan for this money. People like Julian don't steal $250,000 just to let it sit in an account. They do it to fund a new life. This led us back to social media. That single photo was a crack in the dam and we were determined to break it wide open. We went back to the travel influencer's profile. We didn't just look at her posts, we analyzed them. We cross-referenced her tagged friends, the locations she frequented, and the other people commenting on her photos. We were building a digital map of Julian's new life. We discovered he wasn't just on vacation, he was networking. In other photos from the same week, we spotted him in the background, talking to men in expensive suits on a yacht, laughing at a high-end beach resort. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. I remembered our landlord David. He was a shrewd man who had seen it all. I decided to talk to him not as a desperate tenant but as someone seeking advice. I laid out the basic situation. My partner had disappeared and the business was in trouble. I didn't mention the loan yet. David listened patiently, his expression unreadable. When I finished, he grunted, "Your partner, the slick one, Julian." He took a sip of his coffee. I never trusted him, too much flash, all sizzle, no steak. He then told me something that made my blood run cold. About 2 months ago, Julian had approached him and asked a series of hypothetical questions about breaking a commercial lease. He wanted to know what the penalties would be, how quickly the eviction process would move, and if a bankruptcy filing from one partner would protect the other. He was testing the exits, David said, his eyes narrowing, figuring out the blast radius before he lit the fuse. This was premeditated, deeply premeditated. Julian had been planning this for months. David also mentioned that Julian had received a large, official-looking courier package at the roastery a few weeks before the accident. David had signed for it because neither of us was there. He remembered the sender's name because it was unusual, Sovereign Holdings International. A quick search by Ava revealed that Sovereign Holdings International was a shell corporation service based in Panama, specializing in creating anonymous offshore entities. The final piece of the financial puzzle clicked into place. The Cayman Islands account wasn't in Julian's name. It was in the name of a shell corporation he had set up months in advance. The courier package David signed for likely contained the incorporation documents. We had the sabotage, the premeditated plan to break the lease, the creation of an offshore shell company, and the social media evidence proving he was lying about his whereabouts during the manufactured crisis. Ava compiled everything into a single, comprehensive timeline, complete with screenshots, photographs of the damaged equipment, and a sworn statement from David. "This is no longer a civil dispute between partners, James," she said, her voice steely with conviction. "This is felony wire fraud. It's premeditated, it's deliberate, and we have a mountain of circumstantial evidence pointing directly at him." Armed with our dossier, we went to the police. We didn't go to a local precinct. Ava had a contact in the Financial Crimes Division. We sat down with a detective, a seasoned investigator who had seen countless fraud cases. I walked him through the story from the beginning of the partnership to the moment I saw the bank balance. Then Ava laid out our evidence piece by piece. The detective listened intently, his expression shifting from skeptical to intrigued. When he saw the geotagged photo from the Bahamas, he leaned back in his chair. "Well, I'll be," he said softly. "The idiot couldn't help himself. They never can." He told us that our thorough work had done most of his job for him. He agreed that it was a clear case of wire fraud and said he would be taking it to the district attorney's office to secure a warrant. As we left the station, the city lights seemed brighter. The air felt cleaner. The weight on my shoulders hadn't vanished, but it had changed. It was no longer the crushing weight of victimhood. It was the heavy, satisfying weight of the weapon I was about to use against him. Julian was sunning himself in paradise, believing he was a genius who had committed the perfect crime. He had no idea that a warrant was about to be issued for his arrest, and that his digital ghost was flying back across the ocean to haunt him. The investigation was over. Now, the trap had to be set. The arrest warrant was a significant victory, but it was only a piece of the puzzle. As the detective explained, a warrant for Julian in the U.S. was useless as long as he was hopping between non-extradition-friendly islands in the Caribbean. "He can live like a king down there for years off your money," the detective warned us. "We can flag his passport, but if he's smart, he'll lay low. We need him to come back. We need to lure him into our territory." The idea of Julian living a life of luxury on my stolen future was unbearable. Waiting for him to make a mistake wasn't an option. We had to force his hand. We had to create a reason for him to return, a reason so compelling he'd ignore the risks. Ava and I spent an evening brainstorming in the silent roastery, the whiteboard now covered in Julian's digital footprint. "What does a narcissist like Julian crave more than anything?" Ava asked, tapping a pen against her chin. "Money," I answered immediately. "More than money," she corrected. "Admiration, the appearance of success. He didn't just steal the money, he stole it to perform the role of a wealthy, successful mogul. He needs an audience." And that was our angle. We weren't going to bait him with a threat, we were going to bait him with an opportunity to gloat. Our plan had two phases. Phase one was to control the narrative. Julian likely assumed I was a crushed, bankrupt mess, too devastated to fight back. We needed to change that perception. I worked with Ava to draft a carefully worded letter to all our suppliers and wholesale clients. In it, I explained that the business had been the victim of a significant internal fraud by my former partner, that we were cooperating with a criminal investigation, and that while operations were temporarily suspended, the Artisan Roast Collective was not dead. I promised to honor all our debts and to relaunch stronger than ever. Then I reactivated the company's social media, which Julian had abandoned. I posted a single powerful message. It was a picture of me standing next to the silent roaster with a determined look on my face. The caption read, "Sometimes you have to burn it all down to build something better. A new roast is coming soon, relaunch stronger." It was vague but defiant. It showed I wasn't broken. Phase two was the bait. We knew Julian was monitoring our online presence. His ego would demand it. He'd want to watch my demise from his beachfront paradise. We had to give him a show. Through one of her corporate contacts, Ava learned about a prestigious specialty coffee convention happening in Miami in 3 weeks. Miami was our golden ticket, close to the Caribbean, a hub of international finance, and most importantly, firmly on U.S. soil. "He loves these events," I told Ava. "He always called them a target-rich environment. It's the perfect stage for him." The plan was audacious. We would announce that Artisan Roast Collective had secured a massive new investment and was not only relaunching but expand. Ding, we would fabricate a story about a new partnership with a fictional, high-profile hospitality group. And we would announce that we were unveiling our new brand and future plans at the Miami Coffee Convention. To make it believable, we needed to spend money we didn't have. This was the biggest gamble. I took a personal loan against the only asset I had left, my small apartment. It was everything I had. I used the money to book the most prominent booth space at the convention. I hired a graphic designer to create a slick, professional presentation about our new direction. We printed banners, brochures, and press kits that screamed success. The centerpiece of our fake relaunch was the Arc Phoenix blend, complete with gorgeous packaging and a backstory about rising from the ashes. Ava drafted a press release that was a masterpiece of corporate fiction. It hinted at the departure of a previous partner and celebrated a new era of visionary leadership. She sent it to every major coffee industry blog and magazine. The news spread like wildfire. The story of a beloved roastery surviving a dramatic betrayal and coming back stronger was compelling. People were talking. Now we had to make sure Julian saw it. We used a small portion of the loan to run a highly targeted social media ad campaign. We targeted users in the Caribbean with interests in luxury travel, entrepreneurship, and specialty coffee. We specifically targeted followers of the travel influencer Julian was with. The ads featured our bold new branding and an invitation to our exclusive launch event in Miami. We were dangling the one thing Julian couldn't resist: a public spectacle of the success he thought he had destroyed, happening right under his nose. For 2 weeks there was silence. The convention date loomed and the money I'd borrowed was draining away. I started to lose my nerve. "What if he doesn't take the bait?" I asked Ava one night, the weight of my gamble pressing down on me. "He will," she said with unwavering confidence. "You've built a stage and shown a spotlight on it. He won't be able to stop himself from stepping into it. He needs to see with his own eyes how you're failing without him. Or even better, he needs to swoop in and try to take credit for it." Her prediction came true 3 days before the convention. We got a hit. A new anonymous user registered for our VIP launch event on the convention website. The registration was made from an IP address originating from a high-end resort in Nassau, Bahamas. The name on the registration was generic, John Smith, but the email address used to register was one I had seen before. It was a private email Julian used for personal dealings, one he thought I knew nothing about. I had only seen it once years ago when he'd accidentally CC'd me on a message. I had never forgotten it. He had taken the bait. The detective in the financial crimes unit was alerted. He coordinated with the Miami-Dade Police Department. They would be waiting in plain clothes at the convention center. My job was simple: get Julian into the booth and keep him there until the police could move in. The switch was about to happen. For months, I had been the one dancing to his tune, playing the part of the fool in his elaborate production. But now, the roles were reversed. I had written a new final act, and he was walking right into it, blinded by his own arrogance, ready for his close-up. The stage was set in Miami, and the star of the show had just confirmed his attendance. The Miami Beach Convention Center was a symphony of noise and energy. The air was thick with the aroma of coffee from 100 different vendors, the buzz of grinders, the hiss of espresso machines, and the murmur of thousands of conversations. Our booth, Booth 305, was positioned prominently near the main entrance. It looked incredible. The Phoenix Blend banners were striking, the lighting was professional, and the display of beautifully designed and completely empty coffee bags gave the impression of a thriving, confident brand. I stood at the front of the booth, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Ava was with me, calm and composed, pretending to be a new business associate. Plainclothes detectives were scattered throughout the hall. One was posing as a coffee buyer near our booth, another as a janitor, and two more were near the exits. They were invisible, but I knew they were there, and their presence was a thin thread of security in a sea of anxiety. All I had to do was play my part. The day crawled by. We spoke to dozens of people, real buyers, curious competitors, industry bloggers. I gave my scripted speech about our new direction so many times the words started to lose their meaning. With every person who approached, my head would snap up, searching for his face. By mid-afternoon, a familiar dread began to set in. What if he had changed his mind? What if the anonymous registration was Jay? Asked him toying with me from a distance. And then I saw him. He was standing about 50 feet away, partially obscured by a crowd watching our booth. He looked different, tanned, thinner, and wearing an expensive linen suit that screamed island money. But the smug, confident posture was unmistakable. He was observing the scene, a small, condescending smile playing on his lips. He was enjoying the show just as Ava had predicted. He finally started walking toward us. Time seemed to slow down, my breath caught in my throat. Ava gave my arm a subtle squeeze, a silent reminder, stick to the script. Well, James, he said as he arrived at the booth, his voice dripping with false sincerity. He didn't even seem surprised to see me. I have to admit, I'm impressed. I heard you had some operational issues. Looks like you've bounced back, found yourself a new sugar daddy. He gestured vaguely toward Ava. My entire body screamed with the urge to lunge at him to wipe that smirk off his face. But I remembered the plan. I forced a tight, neutral smile. Julian, what a surprise to see you here, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. Things have been challenging, yes, but we're pushing forward. This is Ava, my new partner. She's the one who helped secure our new round of funding. Ava extended a hand, her expression perfectly pleasant. A pleasure. James has told me so little about you. Julian shook her hand, his eyes scanning our setup with a critical gaze. Funding, huh? Impressive, he said, picking up a bag of the Phoenix Blend. Catchy name, rising from the ashes, is that it? A bit dramatic, don't you think? He was testing me, prodding me, expecting me to break. It's been a dramatic few months, I said evenly, but the new investors are incredible. They're a global hospitality group looking to create an exclusive coffee program. They loved our story. I leaned in, lowering my voice conspiratorially. Honestly, Julian, what you did, it turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to the business. His smile faltered for a fraction of a second. This wasn't the reaction he expected. He was looking for a broken man, not a thriving entrepreneur. His ego was pricked. Is that so? He scoffed. And who is this mysterious investor? Anyone I know? You'll meet them soon enough, I said, gesturing deeper into our booth where we had a small private meeting area set up. We're actually about to sign the final papers. You're just in time for the celebration. This was the critical moment. The hook. The idea that he was missing out on an even bigger score, that his grand betrayal had inadvertently led to my greater success, was an insult his narcissism couldn't endure. He had to know more. He had to see it for himself. All right, James, he said, his curiosity getting the better of him. Lead the way, I've got to see this. He followed me into the small, curtained-off area at the back of the booth. Ava stayed at the front, acting as a lookout. The space was small, just a table and two chairs. On the table was a single, thick manila envelope. So where are they? Julian asked, looking around impatiently. Your big-shot investors. I looked him straight in the eye. The time for pretending was over. There are no investors, Julian. Confusion flickered across his face. What are you talking about? This whole thing, I said, gesturing to the booth outside. It's all fake. The Phoenix Blend, the new partnership, the funding. I built all of this for you. I knew you wouldn't be able to resist seeing it. His smug demeanor evaporated, replaced by a cold, cautious anger. What is this, James? What kind of game are you playing? It's not a game. I pushed the manila envelope across the table toward him. This is for you. Call it a final invoice for services rendered. He opened the envelope. Inside wasn't a contract, but copies of our evidence. The first page was a high-resolution printout of his geotagged photo from the Bahamas. Underneath it was a picture of the sabotaged wiring on the roaster. Then came a copy of David's sworn statement about the lease inquiries and the courier package. And on the final page, a copy of the warrant for his arrest on charges of felony wire fraud. He stared at the documents, his face draining of all color. The tan couldn't hide the pale shock underneath. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and pure fury. "You," he stammered, "you went to the cops." "I did," I said calmly, "and now your investors would like a word." On that cue, the curtain behind him was pulled aside. Two detectives, no longer posing as civilians, stepped into the small space, blocking his only exit. One of them held up his badge. "Julian Croft," the detective said, his voice calm and authoritative, "you're under arrest." Julian lunged, not at me, but for the exit, trying to shove past the officers. It was a futile, pathetic attempt. They subdued him Uically and professionally, cuffing his hands behind his back. The arrogant mask was completely gone, replaced by the snarling, desperate face of a cornered animal. "You'll never prove any of it, James," he yelled as they led him away, his expensive suit now rumpled. "You'll regret this." As they escorted him through the convention hall, a murmur went through the crowd. People stopped and stared. The charismatic marketing guru was being led away in handcuffs. The performance was over. I stepped out of the booth and watched them go. I didn't feel triumph or joy. I just felt a profound, quiet sense of relief. The bill had been served. The debt was being paid. The sound of the coffee machines and the buzz of the crowd slowly returned to my ears, but this time it sounded like a new beginning. The aftermath of Julian's arrest was a whirlwind of legal proceedings, media inquiries, and the slow, arduous process of untangling the mess he had made. The fake convention booth had cost me nearly everything I had left, but it was the best investment I ever made. The very public nature of his arrest at a major industry event meant the story was contained and defined on my terms. I wasn't the failed business owner. I was the one who had outsmarted the con artist. With Julian in custody, the district attorney's office moved swiftly. Our evidence was so thorough that Julian's high-priced lawyer quickly realized a trial would be a disaster for him. Faced with a mountain of proof, the sabotage, the offshore account, David's testimony, and the damning social media posts, Julian accepted a plea bargain. He pled guilty to wire fraud and was sentenced to several years in federal prison. The sentence included a restitution order for the full $250,000, though the prosecutor warned me that seeing that money again was a long shot. Most of it had likely been spent or was hidden so deep in offshore accounts that it would take years to recover, if ever. That was a bitter pill to swallow, but justice wasn't just about the money. It was about the accountability. It was about the fact that he was no longer sunning himself on a beach with my future. He was in a cell, stripped of his charm and his freedom. The loan was still my problem. The bank didn't care about the fraud, they cared about the legally binding document with my signature on it. The debt was a mountain casting a long shadow over my life. For weeks, I felt like I was back at square one, only this time I was $250,000 in the hole. The roastery sat silent and dark, a constant reminder of both my dream and my ruin. But the story of what happened at the convention had an unintended side effect. It had turned into something of an industry legend. People were fascinated by the story of the Phoenix blend and the elaborate trap I had set. Bloggers wrote about it, podcasts discussed it. I started getting emails and calls, not from creditors, but from other roasters, cafe owners, and even a few genuine investors. They weren't offering sympathy, they were expressing respect for my resilience and ingenuity. One of those calls was from a woman named Eleanor Vance, the owner of a well-respected regional chain of cafes that we had once tried and failed to land as a client. She had been at the Miami convention and had witnessed Julian's arrest. "I've been in this business for 30 years, Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice crisp and no nonsense. "I've seen my share of charlatans. What I haven't seen is someone fight back with that much style. I was impressed by your coffee before all this. Now I'm impressed by you." What? She made me an offer. It wasn't an investment to resurrect the Artisan Roast Collective. It was a partnership. Her company would assume the lease on my old space, pay off the fraudulent business loan in exchange for a portion of my future stake, and hire me to build and run their entire roasting operation under a new co-branded name. I would have complete creative control over the coffee, access to their capital and distribution network, and a chance to build something bigger and more stable than I had ever dreamed of. It wasn't the path I had originally envisioned. My pride bristled at the idea of giving up the name I had created, but I realized my old dream was tied to a past I needed to escape. This was a chance to do what I loved without the burden of a toxic partnership and crushing debt. This was a chance to truly rise from the ashes. I said yes. Over the next year, we built the new brand from the ground up. We renovated the old warehouse, installing not one but two new state-of-the-art roasters. I hired back some of my old staff, including Isabel, the head barista, whose joy at returning was palpable. My cousin Ava became our official financial consultant, ensuring every number was triple-checked and every contract was ironclad. Our landlord David, who had been patient with me through the whole ordeal, was so pleased with the new sta. Blee arrangement that he gave us a discount on the first year's rent. I still live in the apartment above the roastery and I still wake up to the smell of roasting coffee. But now it's not a smell tinged with anxiety and betrayal. It's the smell of a secure future, of a craft I have perfected, and of a second chance I earned. I learned that trust is a precious commodity, one that must be earned and verified. I learned that business isn't just about passion, it's about vigilance. Julian's betrayal was a fire that burned my world to the ground. But in the scorched earth, something new and stronger began to grow. I never saw the restitution money, but it no longer matters. The real victory wasn't getting the money back. It was rebuilding my life on my own terms, forging a new path forward, one perfectly roasted batch at a time. The partnership I have now is built on respect, transparency, and a shared love for great coffee. It may not have the flashy, intoxicating charm of my partnership with Julian, but it's real. And it's a foundation that no one can ever steal from me again.